The clown. Just another day on the park bench. It has been a while since I've had my last cigar, so may as well enjoy this kind of weather. It is a quiet morning. No gang shootings or murders happening today. Hell, even the air feels good. The city is crime-ridden as usual. Gangs and street thugs run rampant throughout the city, except for one area. The block I live in, because they know better to not mess with it, because of me. Despite my appearances, this is not how I look. It's just a disguise to blend in with the common crowd. Yes, I got a red nose and balding hair like a clown, but I am all but those things. And I know normal people would consider clowns to be pure evil because of how popular media portrays them like so. Like John Wayne Gacy, the Joker, and Pennywise the Clown. Despite having a bad rep, I don't let that affect me at all. Rather than killing people as the media portrays clowns to do so, I have been saving the people for over dozens of millennia. I don't know how I came to be on this planet. I just woke up in the middle of the crater and dug myself out of the rubble without any clothes. Unsure what to do next, I wandered aimlessly until an old man by the name of Stinland happened to wander my way. Without even thinking, I approached him, and boy, was that a mistake. His reaction was a mixture of shock and disgust, and he was ready to club me with his walking stick. But thank God he didn't. After an hour of explaining my situation to him, we quickly became friends. We talked for a little bit. But before I left, he told me to wait for a few hours and quickly hobbled over the sandy dunes. Stanland returned with a loincloth and a long tunic. These once belonged to my son, but he went off to start a new family, so I figured, why not give it to my new friend? The clothes were a perfect fit. Thank you so much, Stinland.
Don't mention it. Just keep those on. You don't want to get beheaded when you go to the city. You are going to the city, are you?
What is a city? The old man sighed.
A city is a place that has these giant stones that people live in, and I suggest you find one. You can't live out here in the wilderness by yourself.
I suppose you are right. Where is the nearest one of these cities?
Just a couple miles that way.
He waved his hands in the direction of the dunes.
I am sure you will find one.
Thanks, mister.
Yeah, don't mention it. But I would change your appearance.
He looked around and saw that the strange clown-like person has vanished. In just a few hours, I have arrived in the large ancient city without a problem. There were merchants shouting, beggars asking for money, and the soldiers standing, ready to break all evildoers in half. Even though they had different occupations, they all did something in common. For as soon as I walked the filthy streets, they all stared at me. Some had a concerned face, others were laughing. A tall man with a great ebony beard approached me with a smile.
Hey friend, are you lost? Because if you are, then I will help you become unlost if you give me a fee.
He took out a blade and prodded against my neck muscles that drew a little bit of blood.
Just give me your money, and I will leave you alone. That is all.
What is this money stuff you speak of?
Do not try tricks with me, boy. Hand over your wallet, or you will die.
I still do not understand. The stranger quickly lost his patience and brought down the blade, which shattered into dozens of pieces. His confidence quickly disappeared as soon as the sharp blade broke and was replaced with a look of shock. Back then I didn't know any better and thought the blade as another pair of clothes, just like how Stenland gave me clothes. So I grabbed the nearest sword that belonged to a guard and chased down the stranger. I lost the bandit that attempted to rob me, but the guards were hot on my heels and had a few others to back them up.
Surrender now, or face the consequences.
They seemed upset. So I threw my sword down and was quickly arrested with iron handcuffs. Although I kept on breaking them like they were pieces of cotton candy. They sent me to work in the slave pits, where they built large, glorious palaces and statues to commemorate powerful overlords and kings. Their attempts of cruelty was rather amusing. Whenever they cracked a whip across my stomach, rather than feeling an intense stinging pain, I would feel a ticklish sensation that would have me laughing immensely. They tried other means of torture, but it all didn't work. They tried feeding me to the crocodiles, but their teeth would shatter on my skin. They would even have me lift a large brick by myself, which I did with relative ease. Hell, even the pharaoh himself was impressed with my strength and was even willing to look past my comical appearance. He saw what I was capable of and wanted to make me captain of his guard and enslave those that I used to labor alongside with, so I took him up on his job offer. Everything was going fine. If the slaves were out of line, I would just calmly hold them down and warn them that next time I would throw them in the slave pits, but I didn't have the heart to do it. Over the years, being captain grew tiring and turned into a disgusting job. I saw some atrocities the guards would commit towards the slaves. They treated them like animals. One day, I saw one of my subordinates whipping a frail old man that looked familiar. I pulled him off, and there lied Stinland, the man who gave me my very first wardrobe ever. He lay there dying in my arms. And it was within that single night I walked towards the pharaoh's palace with no one being able to stop me. The last thing I remembered from the pharaoh before I tore his head clean off was him begging and pleading, and with the collapse of the Egyptian empire, I wandered off into history. Over the centuries, I learned to transform my appearances, not just my speech, but my looks as well. Traveling to different lands and overseas, I experienced hundreds of cultures from many regions of the world. From the tundras of the Swiss Alps to the deserts of Dubai, I lived until I reached the modern times. Alas, even though we as a species have advanced morally and technologically, a majority of us have failed and refused to think independently, even with all the information we have at our fingertips. But it is not their fault, for the blame goes to the ones in power. My thoughts were broken by the sudden sound of screeching tires, which was followed by a scream. I bolted towards the shrieking, cutting corners and leaping through alleyways with the swiftness of a parkour runner. With one final bound over a tall, rusty chain-link fence, I spotted a large murmuring crowd gathering around. Step aside. I pushed my way through the mass of bodies and saw, in the center, was a young, pale boy. He wore a green baseball cap, pants that was barely clinging onto his hips and heavily sagged, and a white t-shirt that had spots of red. The boy was wheezing heavily and often went into a coughing fit that drew out blood. His name was Jack, the son of a struggling heroin addict and a neighborhood troublemaker and bad boy. Or so he says. Since day one when I moved to the city 7 years ago, I have known the boy. At first, we didn't acknowledge each other whenever we passed through the hallways, but one day, when I was making tea, I heard an urgent knock. I opened up the door and saw Jack crying. "My mom, she's not breathing!" We both broke into the apartment, there spread across the filthy floor with Jack's mother, drugged out of her mind and barely moving. I ran out into the counter and dialed the emergency center. My call was quickly answered, and they immediately placed the mother in the hospital. That afternoon, I was in the hallway with the boy and 2 police officers.
"Do you have anyone to take care of your son?"
One of the questioning officers asked. The boy didn't even respond. He just drew a blank stare, with tears streaming down his face. Without thinking, I said, "I will take care of the boy."
"What relation do you have with him?"
the police officer asked. "I have been their neighbor for a good year now, and I know Jack. Me and him hang out all the time." That was a lie. I just moved into the apartment last month, but the kid has a better chance staying with me rather than going off into some foster home. Is it okay with you, son? Jack slowly nods. Alright, he's yours until his mom gets back into health. He was with me for several weeks. By then, we have known each other very well. I fed him, took him to school, and gave him a place to sleep. On days when he had off of school and I didn't have work, we would end up playing video games for the entire evening. I liked having him around, and when he started referring to me as Auntie, I gladly embraced it. But soon his mom came back from the hospital and asked for his son back. Hey, I am going to keep my eye on you, I said with a stern look.
Yeah? Whatever. Come on, Jack.
Jack was reluctant to go, but I nodded for him to leave with his mom. Years passed. Jack turned from a curious kid into a rebellious teenager. Whenever trouble was brewing, Jack always came by to see his dear old auntie to talk about it. My door was always open for the kid. I adore him. But in the most recent of months, I began to see him less frequently. His clumsy footsteps echoed through the apartment halls late at night, and last time I did see him, it was around 1 a.m., and he had blood on his t-shirt. Jack, what you got on your t-shirt? Nah, it's just a little ketchup stain is all, Auntie. You know, I can't get enough of those burgers at 29th Street. He said with a smile that I was half-assed. All teenagers were bad liars, but this one, was the worst of them all. That ain't no ketchup stain, Jack. I sighed, and then I waved him over into my apartment. Auntie, it's too late and I'm tired. I continued to gesture him into the door. Jack grunted in irritation and walked in, knowing that there was no way he could talk out of this one. The conversation lasted until 5 in the morning. It turns out that a man named Ariel recruited Jack to his gang called the Silver Vipers, the most ruthless gang that the city has ever given birth to. They were making him commit all sorts of crimes, just so he can move up the ranks in the underworld. They look after me, Auntie. If anyone messes with me, then Ariel's gonna pop him. Bang. Right between the eyes. Bullshit, Jack. I've seen so many kids like you being promised protection, but they only look after themselves. Alright. Like you want to provide me protection? This is a chance to go out on my own and make something of myself. Listen! I reached out to grab his hand. Get your hand away from me! He smacked it in defiance. We stared at each other for what felt like a few minutes, but it was only seconds. Fine, you want to experience what it's like to be on your feet? Then be my guest. Gladly. Jack stomped out of the door. And now this happens. This is always what happens. People always follow the wrong people who is in power. Like the Pharaoh and now this Ariel. The bloodstain continues to expand throughout Jack's t-shirt. Auntie? He choked those words out. While locking eyes with mine, they were filled with fear, and the light that was once full of that haughty defiance was dulling out. A distant screeching sound of a siren cut through the murmuring of the crowd, and soon a large white ambulance was there. 2 paramedics bolted out of the back of the vehicle with a stretcher and placed Jack into it. Later, on the same evening after the accident, a crimson red 1972 Barracuda is navigating through the streets. Loud rock music is blasting through the speakers, shaking the car to its core. The driver was a large man of 30s with a pot belly and arms that are built like tree trunks. He slowly pulled over into the front of the store and opened the glove compartment. He pulled out a Smith & Winston, checked the bullet chambers for a couple of seconds, and tucked it into his waistband. Then, in a calm fashion, he got out of the crimson car and walked into the store. After a few minutes, he was out of the store with blood heavily smeared on his gold chain and t-shirt and got into his car.
Punk ass bitch,
he muttered while turning on the car. The engine roared, and soon the large man was back on the road. There was a sudden impact that crushed the passenger side of the car. The force startled the heavy-set man so much that he went into a cursing frenzy. The car skidded across the street and into the middle of traffic. He opened his eyes. Everything is so fuzzy, and the only thing he could see clearly was his hands that were trembling. He looked up to the passenger's side. Within half a minute, the blurry vision became crystal clear, and he saw that the side door was caved in, with the glass window being completely shattered. Outside the car was a woman with intense anger in her eyes, and she was pacing back and forth like a predator waiting for an opportunity to strike down on her prey. He quickly reached into his pants and pulled out the Smith & Wesson. With one swift motion, the chamber clicked, but before he had a chance to point the weapon, the woman was already charging towards the car at full speed. With a mighty blow, the car tumbled through the streets and crashed into the lamppost. Dazed, the heavy-set man looked up to see that the world was completely upside down. No, it wasn't the world, it was the car. Something was strong enough to flip the car over. The force knocked the gun out of his hand, and now it was hidden among the glass-infested roof of his car. He unbuckled his seatbelt and fell onto the floor, cutting himself upon the shards of broken glass. "Ariel!" A voice screeched with such ferocity that it sounded more animal than human. Desperate, he brushed his hands on the floor, ignoring the tiny shards that pricked his skin, and felt the thick handle of the pistol. Through the darkness, he somehow was able to feel out his gun and quickly gripped it. Just then, the bottom of the car was torn up from the roof and flung into the sky. A woman stood there overshadowing the man, but he wasn't having none of it. He brought up the gun and shot the woman point blank. The bullet hit dead center in the forehead, but only left a small blemish on her caramel skin and a long string of smoke. She ignored the pain and shouted, "Jack was only 13! He rained a barrage of bullets towards her face, each one gradually breaking the skin. The gun then began to click. "Fuck!" he screamed in frustration. "I have watched that boy grow up!" The woman dug her fingers in the spot where the bullets landed and gripped a piece of her skin that was dangling. Then slowly, she began to pull. At first there were small clumps of her skin, but then she started grabbing fistful, revealing a pale white skin, a red nose, and crimson balding hair. "And like so many other people I've come to cherish in my life, they had to be abused by some dumbass I was lucky enough to obtain some form of power." With the final yank, he tore off the final slab of skin, revealing a clown with yellow fangs and soulless white eyes that was towering over the thug. The man was scared beyond all belief. He just saw a woman turn into a clown monster.
"Look, man, I don't know who this Jack is."
His face was met with the stinging, rough, open hand of the clown monster. Then there was another, and another. The fourth dislocated his jaw. The man was screaming in agonizing pain. With the fifth slap, the clown put much more effort and completely tore the right side of his face off. The man was gargling. Blood ran down on his right side, and he was shaking violently. And with pinkish, lifeless eyes, he collapsed. Later, multiple news channels reported that Ariel's body and a few other high-ranking gang members were grisly displayed on stop signs throughout the city with a message written in blood. "Death to all Vipers." In that single evening, the Vipers became history. The responders were able to get Jack within the ER. When I went to visit him, he was all hooked up in a machine. His torso was wrapped heavily like a mummy, and he was wheezing. "Are you a family member?" There, laying across the room, was a man in his mid-40s. His leg was heavily cast, and he had a book in his hand. No, just a family friend.
Oh really? Those are hard to come across these days.
He said while turning the page. The cover of his book had a muscular man, almost naked if it weren't for the loincloths covering everything, and his powerful arms were wrapped around the neck of a lion, and the title read, Tarzan of the Apes.
Well, you must be a very good friend if you went all the way here just to see him.
He looked up with a grin. Then he fixed his eyes on the book and continued reading quietly. Thanks, I whispered while looking down on the helpless body. I stood by his side until visiting hours were closed and the nurses shooed me away. And so I had to leave the boy alone in the dark, cold, empty room. I returned the next day. He was still in a coma-like state, and the following day after, and the day after that. It was on the 5th day that he muttered, Auntie. That caught me off guard, and then I leaned forward. Jack, it's okay, Auntie's here.
You know, they say that the brain is more active if you talk to him frequently. Why don't you try reading to him every once in a while?
A voice came out. It was the stranger with the broken leg. He was reading a different book labeled The Richest Man in Babylon. How would you know what the boy needs? He doesn't need me to read him something.
Actually, we read to kids so that way we can form a bond, and it is in our darkest moments that we need that bond.
He closed the book and motioned for me to take it with a smile.
Trust me, it will be okay,
he said. Reluctantly, I grabbed the book and read aloud to him. The first chapter was about a scribe in ancient Babylon who never makes enough money to sustain his family. One day, a rich man came by and wanted to get some work done. The scribe said, I will do the job, but can you tell me how to get so wealthy? The wealthy man smiled and agreed. The scribe worked non-stop until he completed the job. So, as promised, the man simply said,
Keep 1/10 of what you earn the entire year. Amass enough coin and use it to invest wisely.
So he gathered all the coin in a year and approached a bricklayer for an opportunity to mine precious glass. Proud of his achievement, he went to the rich man to tell him. Rather than praising him, the old man shook his head and asked,
Why would you go to a bricklayer for something he has no knowledge of, rather than a jewelry maker who mines all the resources himself? You wasted your money!
As predicted, all the precious glass he was promised was useless. Still, he was determined to be rich. So once more, he gathered all his resources and approached a shield maker who was in need of funds for copper. So he funded all the copper. In exchange, he was promised 30% per shield sold. He developed a strong business ethic, worked hard every day, and spent very little on himself, and spent all the earnings into the goods and services he could provide. Over 2 years later, the old rich man was so impressed with the scribe's work ethic that he asked him to take over his business, and that is how the scribe became the richest man in Babylon. By the time I finished the first chapter, it was nighttime. I looked up at the clock and it read 6:55. It was almost time to go.
Nice story, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
What is your name?
Jimmy. He extended a hand. I shook it. Nice to meet you. The nurse came in. All right, Mrs. Jason, it's time to go. The next day, I walked in and saw Jack, fully awake at his bed. Jack? I hugged him.
Auntie, I should have listened to you better.
Tears began flowing down his cheek.
It's okay, man. You're gonna be alright. Just focus on getting better. I don't know what to do. Oh God, the vipers, they're gonna think I'm a loose end. They're gonna think I snitched.
He began to panic.
No. While you were asleep, somebody took care of him, I promise. No, Ariel is just too much for them to handle. Oh God, I am dead. It's true.
I scrambled through a stack of papers that is on top of a coffee table and pulled out the newspaper that was 2 weeks old and flipped it to the page that displayed the bodies. See? Some rival gang got to them. They will bother you no more. The boy studied the article carefully for a good 5 minutes. Then, he slumped back and looked at me. Listen, what I said before. Jack, we all have done some stupid things before. You are very lucky to be coming out of this alive at all. I mean, look at that wound. If you keep on going down this path, then next time you will be dead. I want you to be safe and sound as always. I patted his frail, bony shoulder, and the boy resumed crying. He continued to cry and apologize for a few minutes. By the time he was done, his nose was running a thick river of mucus, and his eyes were pink. Listen, and listen well. Once you are healed up, do you want to come live with me? I know I may not have much, but it is better than being at that place you are at right now. And I know if we work hard, that we can provide for something better. Jack then wiped the mucus onto his forearm, and then nodded. That's good. It sounds like I got myself an official nephew. Now sit tight, the nurse is gonna come in and take a good look at you. Thank you, Auntie. I turn around to get the nurse. Auntie? I stop mid-step. Yes, Jack? Can you stay with me tonight? Boy, you ain't gotta tell me twice. We both broke out into a smile. That day I stayed with him and read him another chapter from The Richest Man in Babylon. Chapter 6, The Spearmaker of Babylon. Rodan recently made spears for the king's army. The king was so impressed that he offered 50 pieces of gold for his work. Rodan, unsure what to do with the gold, held on to it for a few days. Soon his dear sister asked the artisan for a loan so her husband can start a business. Rodan thought it was not a good investment, so he went to seek counsel from the moneylender Mathon. Mathon listened to his predicament and gave him 2 stories to learn from. The first story was about an ox who labored all day in the fields, dragging a large plow that chafed his neck. After a hard days of work, he asked his friend the donkey for advice.
If you bellow enough times, then the farmer would think you are sick and leave you alone,
said the donkey. So the next day he did so, and he was left alone. The work needed to be done, and so the farmer hitched the plow to the donkey and made him work under the hot sun. The donkey resented the ox for putting him in the predicament, and they never spoke again. Mathon explained the moral of the first story is that when you offer help, do it in a way that will not bring any harm to you financially. He does this by asking for some kind of collateral that he could hold on to. Mathon then pulls out a large chest full of small tokens that he uses to keep track of the debts. He pulled out a bronze bracelet and explained that this once belonged to a friend that was wealthy like him, but he threw it all away for a woman who ended up killing him. He pulled out a pack rope tied into a knot that belonged to a wise camel trader who was always good on paying him back. After showing these examples, he answered Rodan's predicament with a question. How much does he know about trading? Does he know how to buy things at the lowest cost? And does he know where he could sell his goods at a great price? Rodan admitted that his brother-in-law did not have any experience with trading at all. Then you will lose your money if you do give it to him. Merchants must learn how to trade in order to be profitable. If, however, he did say yes and gives an elaborate answer on how he can make profit, then I will lend him the gold. I closed the book and saw that he was fast asleep. That is some boy you got there. It was the same man from before, this time in a wheelchair. He rolled over right next to me. Oh, hello, Jimmy. How's it going, Mr. Jason? Good. You? Just hanging in there with my broken foot. His leg was heavily casted and rested on the wheelchair. "So, is he enjoying the book so far?" "Well, it is putting him to sleep, that's for sure." He chuckled at that. "I see. Learning something at first does seem a little boring, but the more older you get, the more you realize you are better learning off as much as possible at a young age. I just thought that this bestseller would get him into reading." "Oh? And what does reading actually do in general for a kid?" "It does a lot. For one, it gives you more empathy because it puts you in the shoes of the character, and thus you could relate to their joy and struggles to some degree." He looked at Jack, who continued to snore. "In another way, it would reduce stress and depression, and Lord knows that this kid right here, needs to somehow find a way to escape this reality when things go bad." He continued, then he wheeled over to me. "The more you read, the easier life becomes for anybody. It's easy to not read and stay ignorant, but it is hard to pick up a book, which the process seems tedious. However, a lot of great leaders tend to be the most open to new ideas, and they learn to love reading, especially on subjects that they are passionate about. These leaders include Abraham Lincoln, who despite having only 1 year of formal education, became a lawyer and President of the United States. Then there was Afeni Shakur Davis. The mother of the rap legend Tupac Shakur was an activist and former Black Panther who introduced a young boy named Jamal Joseph to books and guided him towards education. Said young men would later bring arts and theaters to the rough streets of Harlem, where hundreds of kids can join in a program called Impact. And finally, there was once a young boy who at the age of 7 read 1,000 Ways to Make $1,000, and ever since then, he reads books feverishly, and has enough wealth to buy an entire town with just the amount of cash he has at hand. Warren Buffett. Finish that book you got in your hand. It'll help you down the long road." With that statement, Jimmy wheeled himself out of the room, leaving me to ponder what he just told me. Jack got better, and within a couple of months he was out of the hospital. I took him back into school, and I started picking up on the habit of reading as much as I could get my hands on. One day, him and I were eating breakfast on the kitchen counter, and I was so absorbed into the book that I didn't hear him. It took him shouting to fully get my attention. "Hey, Auntie!" "Huh? What is it?" "What are you reading there?" I held up the book. In the center was a picture with 2 glowing, angry eyes, a large, wet snout, and sharp set of canine teeth, ready to sink into the flesh of a victim. The title read, "Sundog" by Stephen King. "Sundog, huh? It sounds like a made-up animal. What is it about?" "Well, it's about a kid, much like yourself, named Kevin, who got a Polaroid Sun 600 camera for his birthday, and he begins taking pictures with it. However, it prints out the same picture, and never of the image that it was shot at. The picture shows a large black dog walking along the streets near a white fence. He goes to the local junk shop and talks to the owner about the camera, but he shrugs the boy off, insisting that he keeps taking pictures. Kevin continues to do so, but he notices that the dog is moving with every picture that he is taking. In the next set of pictures, the dog is slowly turning towards Kevin, and around the beast's neck was a string tie that belonged to him. Horrified, he goes to the junk shop owner and tells him that he's going to destroy the camera. The owner switches the camera on Kevin, who ends up destroying the fake one. Kevin then begins to have a series of nightmares of the large black dog chasing him, and he wakes up just as the dog was about to maul him. Slowly, Kevin realized that the camera was not destroyed as the shop owner promised, and the beast still has a chance to escape into the real world. He drives with his father to the pawn shop, where he sees a steady series of flashes. Inside was a shop owner, now completely under the spell of the camera, and was taking pictures. With each flash, the deep growls of the dog grow so loud that it ends up shattering the store's windows. With the final flash, the camera explodes into hot molten plastic, killing the shop owner. The last picture begins to form a bubble, with the dog quickly growing in size, but before it could escape the bubble, the boy snaps the picture of the beast with the camera he bought along the way, and with that, the beast disappeared back into the picture. Jack was leaning forward with an interest. Is that how it ends? Hold on. So I was saying, a year passed, and he got a new computer for his birthday, so he decides to test the word processor out by typing this phrase. The quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. But rather than a printout of this phrase, something different comes. Wanna know what it is? Jack nods. I looked down at the book and read the words aloud in an ominous tone. The dog is loose again. It is not sleeping. It's not lazy. It's coming for you, Kevin. And it is very hungry. And very angry. Huh. That is one hell of a story. Oh yeah, there's more like it. Just check out Stephen King's Cujo and Misery. I have them with me right now. Alright, where are they at? I walked out of the room and quickly returned with 2 of the mentioned books. Just return them to me when you're done. I smiled. Later in the passing months, I saw that he was reading Under the Summer Sun. He occasionally let out small gasps, which were accompanied with a look of disbelief. I even heard him mutter, "This crazy bitch," when he was in the middle of Misery. Gradually, he began reading not only horror, but science fiction novels like Jurassic Park, Ready Player One, A Song of Ice and Fire series, Fahrenheit 451, and many, many more. I think from the beginning of summer to the end of the year, he went through 23 books alone. Although he was still a troublemaker, he gradually made more time to read and got lost in the fantastic world that he found in the pages. 3 years went by, and his love for literature continued to grow. Despite being a high schooler full-time and a part-time employee at a local fast food joint, he somehow was able to keep up with his reading habits. Eventually, he was a founding member for his book club after school, where they met up once every 2 weeks and discussed a novel or book that was selected. One of the books was The Richest Man of Babylon, to which Jack refused to read at first, because he remembered how it put him to sleep. It took multiple times until he was convinced by others to give it another chance. To his surprise, he actually enjoyed the book, and decided to put the ideas behind the book to work. First, Jack amassed $2,000 quickly by taking up a summer job as a construction worker by day while working as a fast food assistant at night. He opened a separate bank account and placed his summer money into it, labeling it as his emergency fund. Then he used the rest of the summer money to buy a used car off of a next-door neighbor who claimed that the car was already a piece of shit. He did that by learning to live frugally, and he only treated himself once every 2 months on dinner. Using the local library, he researched the books recommended by the most successful investors and entrepreneurs, and he came across the idea of value investing. Using the principles of value investing, he did research on multiple companies, but was not able to find any that was on sale at the time, so he did the next best thing. He bought index funds. Every month, he pumped $200 towards the investments and used the remaining money to save up for college. He worked tirelessly until finally he graduated high school and went to a community college to get all of his credentials out of the way. Then he went to university to study finance. I visited from time to time. Come to find out, he made honor roll and was the top student of his department. I couldn't have been more proud of Jack. Eventually, he got out of college and landed a big corporate job in downtown, where he met his future wife, Narrated. As much as I loved the boy and proud of his achievements, I knew that I could not stay any longer. I need to become something more, something that will help the people. As I was driving, I reflected on the words of Jimmy, who said that reading could help out a person a lot. I have lived for so long, and there were many people that I loved and cherished that fell in the hands of ignorance. But I think I have found a way to solve that now, and that is by reading. While I was lost in thought, I did not see a car coming in from the side, completely T-boning me. I vanished without a trace, and the loss completely devastated Jack. I was on the rooftop that night, listening to his cries while tears came down my own face. I hope all is well, Jack. I will be watching you over from time to time. And with that, I morphed my appearance to that of a young man with glasses, ready to educate the world. Years went by and I took up the job of an English teacher for troubled youths. It isn't the most glamorous of jobs, and the students are difficult to deal with at times, but it is all worth it to reach out to the ones who strive to become better. One evening I was walking downtown and I spotted a little girl with her father. Dad, we should go see Mommy real soon. Alright. No, just hold on a minute. That voice. Jack? I immediately dropped my disguise and picked up a new one to that of a clown with a set of colorful balloons. I approached the pair and saw that it was indeed Jack, now a handsome businessman. I was so surprised that I didn't realize I was staring at them for a good minute. Jack took notice. Can I help you? He asked. I got nervous. Yes. Yeah. Here, would you like a balloon for your daughter? It's free. The little girl looked up at me and then at Jack. Can I get one, Papa? Of course you can. Which one would you like? The yellow one, she pointed out. Alright. I plucked the yellow one from the dozens I held and gave it to the girl. Now, Cindy, what do you say? Thank you. Oh, no problem. Jack patted his daughter's head as the child grinned, but he noticed something familiar about my voice. He looked up, but I vanished. Auntie? Yeah, 2020 is a shitty year for all of us with this unnecessary death of George Floyd, this virus, man. But I couldn't help that some of this could have been prevented if, we could have, started taking up the hobby of reading. I mean, we're cooped up inside. Why not do that? Not just fantasy novels, but books about history, finance, and self-help. I feel that if we were to better understand history, then we could have prevented an unnecessary death, and such racial injustice wouldn't have happened. And we would have a better understanding to how the United States government actually works, If we were to read about finance, then we would be able to handle our own money instead of letting dear old Uncle Sam handle our money. I mean, for God's sakes, he's not the one that's working for it. We are, And self-help will allow us to better understand our situations and become more helpful towards the other people that definitely need our help at this time. But hey, I may be wrong. I could be wrong. But hey, tell me your opinion if you think I'm wrong. Be sure to leave a comment section down below, and if you are new, please subscribe to my channel so you can keep up to date with my latest stories. And yeah, have a good day. But I couldn't help that some of this could have been prevented if we could have started taking up the hobby of reading. I mean, we're cooped up inside. Why not do that?